Welcome everyone to today's program, which is looking at the job opportunities and career paths post-COVID, which is now as the city and state are opening up. My name is Renee Sachs, and I'm Executive Director of the Women Builders Council and publisher of Diversity Agenda, and also President of Sachs Communications. So I have a lot of jobs. We're talking about jobs today. We're excited to partner with Columbia School of Professional Studies and its Construction Administration program on the topic of jobs and career paths in the construction industry post-COVID-19. And we're looking at it now, during the pandemic, and as it will roll out. Obviously, the pandemic has impacted everyone in a very unprecedented way, creating a whole new way of doing business in the construction industry in terms of the way we're going to be running a job, social distancing, health and safety concerns, new construction and project management solutions, new technologies, and most important, the way professionals that are trained to think and creatively react to a changing situation. Before we get started, we have a quick poll for you to take. We will share the results at the end of the webinar. And if we can put the poll up, there it is. We're asking you 3 questions. Where are you in the industry now? Do you currently have an advanced degree? And are you considering enrolling in an advanced degree? We'd like to know this information for the purposes of managing our content. So please fill out the poll. Today's discussion is going to assess the impacts of COVID-19 on the construction industry. And we'll outline the skills required for the workforce to meet the demands of new and emerging careers. And for our attendees who are unsure how to navigate a rapidly changing construction labor market, we encourage you to look at the Columbia program because it can contribute a strong foundation for your professional growth. The program today is being led by my co-moderator, Francisco Pineda, who will introduce shortly. Let me tell you a little bit about the Columbia University program, and I encourage you to take the poll while we're speaking. It's a practical curriculum steeped in theory, but also trends data and practical best practices for how you run a job, how you manage a job, and how you think about construction projects. It will enable you to get the latest research in the industry, as well as to help you build your own performance and leadership skills portfolio. And that's a really important asset. So while some of us are not thinking about continuing education or professional education or advanced degrees, this is a moment in time to think about who you are, what you are, and how you're going to perform as you move forward. To help us in our discussion today, Columbia has invited 6 leading construction experts to join us and share their intelligence, their insights, and perhaps most important, their experience. Each of these people have jobs. Some of them have several jobs, and I think you'll learn by example as we listen to them. Let me introduce our experts. Patrick Askew, Executive Vice President at McKissick & McKissick and Deputy Director at the new JFK Terminal 1 project. As part of the leadership team at JFK, Patrick brings a wealth of information in the design and construction industry. He also has delivered some of the most major projects in the city through his work at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. So Patrick's path was from government to the private sector, and that's also a strategy for career development. Magali Austin, also has 2 jobs. Maggie is do I see Maggie here? Yes, where's Maggie? Okay, I know she's here. Is the Chief Diversity and Industry Relations Officer at the New York City Department of Design and Construction, and was newly appointed as Senior Advisor to the Officer of the Mayor for MWB Affairs. So she really does have 2 jobs. She's been responsible for really leading initiatives along with her Commissioner and President, Lorraine Grillo, in terms of new opportunities for smaller businesses, especially MWBs in the industry. And she's going to play, we're actually delighted she's joined the mayor's office. She is a game changer and will provide the kinds of innovative thinking that the industry needs. Denise Berger is Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the Northeast region at AECOM. And she joined in February 2020 as Senior Vice P and COO, Senior Vice President and COO. And her region also includes Metro New York. She's an active Women Builders Council member and previously was Chief of Operations in the Engineering Department at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And during her 30-year career, she has been involved in many of the complex large-scale capital projects, including the World Trade Center Master Plan. And her career path took her from the public sector to the private sector. So we see a trend here, particularly for those of you who are not sure where you want to go yet. Luke Coletti, our next expert, is the president of the Building Trades Employers Association, more commonly known as the BTA. He has served as president and CEO for 21 years. His organization represents all of the 26 contractor associations with over 1,100 construction managers, general contractors, and specialty trade contractors who are signatory to union collective bargaining agreements. And in 2016, BTA contractors had some $35 million in construction revenue. I know that's gone up, Lou, and we're going to be looking at 2020 figures and see how that's going to span out given the impact of COVID. Ralph Esposito is president of Lend-Lease Construction, managing director and president there. And he's in charge of their New York's project management and construction division. He's been with Lend-Lease since 1996, and he provides executive direction for the firm's operations and growth strategies in the New York metropolitan area, which means he's probably the bottom line guy for bringing in new business, right, Ralph?
Yes.
I think yes, okay. He's also very active on the Board of Governors for the New York Building Congress, the Executive Committee of the BTA, as well as holding positions as Vice Chair of the ACE Mentor Program, Treasurer of the Construction Association of Greater New York, AGNY, and also on the board of the Non-Traditional Employment for Women. And as you can see, many of these, because I want you to think today about jobs and careers, and the experts that you have here today are truly representative of how to build a strong career. Finally, Marcelo Velez is Vice President of Manhattanville Development at Columbia University. He serves as the university's point person on all aspects of development design and construction for the university's 6.8 million square foot Manhattanville in West Harlem campus expansion. He's been with the project since 2007, first as an associate vice president for project management and construction before becoming vice president in 2016. And he too has had an interesting career path, and he stayed in one organization. So many of you move from organization to organization. Some of you are just starting out. And again, I encourage you to look at the career paths of many of our experts today as models that you can use. So today's webinar would not be possible without the leadership of Francesco Pineda. Francesco is the faculty and program director at the Columbia School of Professional Studies Master of Science in Construction Administration program. In the academic, there's always long names. They abbreviated calling it CNAD, C-N-A-D. And Francesco's research and professional interests lie in organizational intelligence, critical capabilities, and the structure and management of complex project-based teams and enterprises. He's a lifelong learner, and in coming to know Francesco, very smart, very compassionate about, both compassionate and passionate about the construction industry. In his 18-year career, he's worked on all aspects of the development cycle, investment, development, and construction. Again, a model for many of you to look at. He holds an MBA, an MPA from Columbia University, a BA in history, and in his spare time, he is a U.S. Navy Reserve Supply and Logistics Officer. I guess you do that at night and on the weekends, right? And Francesco? So as you can see, no one on this panel does just one thing. And that's something you should think about as you think about yourself. Now I'll pass it back to Francisco to begin the program. Fran?
Renee, thank you very much. And I want to thank our esteemed panelists for joining us here today to share some of their insight. I also want to thank the Women's Builders Council, who've been partners with us and provided great insight and support and phenomenal knowledge sharing and transfer. This came about over a series of conversations we had in the middle to the end of March and early April with our alumni and our students, many of which were trying to understand what was happening, trying to understand the developments that were emerging between the stop work guidance across the state and the nation, and many really just fearful around what their future prospects held. Through those conversations, it became clear that we kind of had an interesting position of real-time information, hearing about projects that were being put on hold, projects that were being delayed, jobs and roles that were being furloughed. And as part of that ongoing conversation, we thought it might be wise to have a couple of discussions with both our senior alumni and senior leaders in the industry to get a better sense and try and consolidate some of those conversations. What we'd like to do, and it's interesting watching the poll here, I feel like a stock trader looking at these numbers back and forth, is to try and provide both our students, alumni, and our greater stakeholder base a series of well thought through advice and guidance, as well as data around what's happening. Every day is a new day. I wake up, there's information and there's news clips and articles that provide a pretty different perspective. The market's up one day, down another. So, you know, in these times, if anything, it's to just share and talk about what we see happening. Many people have invested long years and careers, and we're coming out of an extraordinary 6, 7, almost 8-year boom in the construction industry. Part of the output from these conversations will be a briefing report that will both provide a set of stats and data, but also guidance and framework to for everybody, all of us, junior, middle, or senior executives, to think through some opportunities that may emerge out of this. So I'll stop at that, and I look forward to the questions that are going to be posed here today. I also urge the participants to reach out to us at the program or to anybody as from the broader community and Women's Builders Council to share their experience and their ideas and their insight to continue to inform the production of this piece and these ideas. So with that, let me get started. As always, I think it's important to set the scene. We have an environment, and with that, I'd like to invite Denise, Ralph, and Marcelo to give us a little bit of insight into their perspectives to how COVID-19 has impacted the job market. I'm going to shoot this first question over to Denise, and it's how has COVID-19 changed the job market in the construction industry? And you are sitting in a really interesting vantage point and coming from the Port Authority and at AECOM now, I'm sure have really been at the nexus of some fascinating information.
Thank you. So I just want to say thanks to Fran and thanks for Renee, Women's Builders Council, and Columbia University for having me here today. So Fran, great question. So we're all on our working from home right now, doing a virtual webinar instead of all together. So that's, you can see how it has changed the way we're conducting business today, right? So if you want to think about it, we're doing this to stay safe, right? We all want to be safe. And by doing that, ridership is down on the public transportation. Port Authority, aviation, 97% of the revenue is down. Transit, same thing, 97% revenue down. So what does that mean? That means the public agencies are getting less revenue. The capital programs are being relooked at or on pause. If you look at where we are, transportation projects are essential, so they're ongoing, but many of them are paused right now, right? Because they're relooking at the revenues coming in and what projects they really need to go forward with. Residential and many commercial projects have stopped. And so because of that, we have to look at new ways of doing business. So, you know, we were at a tremendous growth in 2008. And the opportunities for professionals seeking construction opportunities in our field was tremendous. It was employees had a competitive edge. Negotiations, strategies, salaries were, you know, at an all-time high. And today, because we are on pause, it's a little different atmosphere we are today.
So it was a seller's market. Employees.
Exactly. You got it.
They were shopping around offers, going from job to job.
Exactly.
Now, all right, Ralph, if I can ask you the next question. In light of this, what types of new positions have you been thinking about that are emerging or that you're needing to create to respond to the current challenges you're facing, both on your existing contracts and on potentially new business?
Well, thank you for having me. I would say that, as we address kind of, what the new workforce looks like, I think we have to be aware of kind of the effect that it's had on the kinds of projects that we build and develop in New York City. So really nobody has gone untouched. Aviation, transportation, cultural, healthcare, residential, office, have all been affected either by an economic perspective or kind of a functional perspective in the way that these spaces have been created and how they're going to have to be adapted on a kind of a going forward basis. And I think that what's interesting is that we're going to look for individuals that are more well-rounded in their backgrounds as opposed to being subject matter experts in one particular area. So specifically, I think that people are going to have to be more proficient in schedules. I think we're going to see a plethora of claims coming through on projects from the effects that COVID has had and the effects that COVID will have. So I think that people that can really understand how to build a schedule, how to analyze a claim, I think that professionals, both from a project management and design perspective, are going to have to think very carefully about the supply chain and where we source materials from. Even if we were open in New York, I mean, there is glass that's coming from Asia, there's stone that's coming from Europe, that even if we were able to advance the projects, we just can't. So I think that people are going to have to be thoughtful about how we make things on a going forward basis. I think, we may have to think about some of the way that some of the materials that we use. To have a 500-pound door that it requires 2 people to install, we can't observe social distancing. We may have to rethink some of the ways that we put buildings together. And I also think that people are going to have to get really smart and really familiar with the new insurance issues that are going to pop up in the marketplace.
Fantastic, thank you. And just a very quick follow-on to that, Ralph. Do you imagine that we're going to spend more time planning projects at the onset, specifically thinking around the logistics element of it, perhaps involving safety experts in how those logistics are executed on an operational basis, and perhaps even how certain things will impact the schedule and go back in negotiating language around the contract that addresses scheduling? Do you expect that?
Absolutely. I do, and I think that's largely going to happen in the design phase, right? So I think that we're going to think about the practicalities of how a building comes together and see if there isn't an alternative way to do things.
Got it. So perhaps even a more robust pre-construction and design, which would be the dream of all our architect friends that have been pushing for that. Ralph, thank you very much. Marcelo, the next one's here over to you, and you also sit in an interesting role. You manage one of the largest programs in our market here and have so for a while. You also have a great background in operational, especially military operational experience in your earlier days, where most of us do have to wear multiple hats and are expected to have some measure of capabilities that are beyond our primary roles. Are you seeing, or are you working with your staff to combine or change existing roles, especially the way Ralph highlighted is going to be the need moving forward? You are moving forward on the project now, and what are you currently, how are you currently adapting to some of that?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me as well. And I agree with, everything already stated. I actually don't see that the pandemic will result in any real significant role changes. We're still going to have project managers and supers, but what I do see is, at least in the short term, a spotlight on certain key skill sets. So, including safety, project controls, and contract management. Safety to help develop and implement the new, health and safety protocols that are coming out of the pandemic. Project controls to help develop schedules, estimates, and value engineer as projects move forward under the new normal guidelines. And contract management professionals to deal with, like Ralph said, many of the claims that are sure to come down, based on force majeure delays and suspensions. So, that's clearly a direction that we're heading to. But sort of relate to my military experience a little bit, I also do see the need for sort of more attention to deal with the more complicated set of site logistics. So, you know, it's just not going to be about where you place your crane or where you place your hoist, but really how to implement sort of new screening measures, you know, at the job site entry, how to manage an increasing number of workers who would prefer to drive as opposed to take mass transit, how to identify space within the job site for breaks and for lunch that create the kind of social distancing that's needed. You know, how to create a staggered work schedule so that you don't have a mad rush to the hoist at the same time. And how to institute contact tracing on site should someone become sick. So, you know, a good example of some of that is I've sort of read where some of the CMs are sort of deploying wearable technology to help support their social distancing and also contact tracing. So one product is a wristband that will vibrate if you get within 6 feet of another worker. You know, it's just the direction we're heading.
Fascinating. So I'm going to hand it over to Renee here shortly, but before I do that, Marcelo, what would you say are the 2 roles you'd be looking to hire today, right now, that you had not planned to before COVID? Or rather, maybe what are the skill sets that would stand out to you as you're looking at a resume for a mid-level project manager that comes across your desk? Scheduling, contract.
Yeah, no, I think someone with strong, you know, pre-construction type skill sets, you know, someone who can estimate, who can schedule, who understands site logistics, you know, that's all going to be valuable going forward.
Great. Thank you. Ralph and Denise, would you want to add anything to that or
Sure.
agree?
This is Denise. I would also add, I think it's a good opportunity as the infrastructure projects move forward, you have to think of the project delivery end of it and what strategy is going to be there. So for instance, I think they're going to want to put the projects in the ground as fast as they can, right? And I think to do that, we have to look at alternate project delivery methods in terms of design build, progressive design build. So I guess what, you know, Marcello and Ralph were saying, the more experience or opportunities that someone has in terms of, you know, a recent graduate or mid-level person in their career, they may want to go after a design build certificate or a PMP because that would, as we're saying, today it's going to be a selective market. It's going to be very competitive. So to give someone an edge, and we're going to need professionals with that background. So the more knowledge they have, companies like mine are going to be seeking individuals who not only are structural engineers or architects, but also with that background of knowing how to put a set of contract documents together for design build, for progressive design build.
Perfect.
So I've been listening to some of your responses. In order to get a job in construction, I probably need to be a planner, a safety manager, a contract management specialist, a site logistics specialist. I need to understand how to configure job sites properly. And I probably need to be a little background in medical issues so I can understand how to keep my workers safe. And there's more. So this is about looking at a pathway in the construction industry that would allow you to have the tools to actually make a strategic change or pivot. And so, Maggie, just a question to you. How do you think either young people or you know, and it goes all ages. I think it's regardless of your age or your position in the industry. How do you pivot in this industry if your job has been furloughed or is likely to be re-examined for reasons of cost or efficiency or productivity? How do you make that career pivot so that you can remain valuable and sustainable in a very changing construction industry? I think that's the key. It's changing. What do you think?
So I want to start by differentiating between pivot and crises. The pandemic is a crisis, right? And pivoting is something that we as individuals choose to do. We recognize that there's been a change in the environment and there's a need for pivot, which really requires flexibility and adaptability. And in considering the pivot, you should really look at your skill set. And sometimes that's really difficult for us to do as individuals. So you consult people that you know, your colleagues, your friends, your family. What are your strengths and what do you enjoy doing? Because I think when we look at what we do professionally, it's really, and what we enjoy, it's really a skill set. It's not a particular job, right? It's what we bring to that role. So consider what your strengths are and what you enjoy. What are your career and personal interests? And what is the current economic environment? And you take all of those factors and you try to apply it to that reality, right? So you don't have to re-envision where you want to be long term, but it does entail re-envisioning the path that you take to achieve your goal. As has been said by the panelists, I believe the people who will succeed in this environment are the people who come to the job site with a broad set of skills and are able to translate whatever that skill is into the current reality. I know for us, in terms of the government, the city, there's a huge focus on safety. We really need to make sure that our job sites as owners are safe. So even though you may not have thought that safety is an area that you want to go to, you may want to re-examine the safety, scheduling, estimating, and especially in light of the New York City Department of Buildings and the CDC requirements. Those are all things that you really to think about. So for me, the goal is to make sure that you are adaptable and flexible in terms of how you get to where you want to be.
Patrick, do you have thoughts on how you can create new possibilities? And before you answer, just Maggie, and listening to you for a moment, if I wanted to be a safety manager, I think I would need more training and education in the health area. So I better understood disease control and some of the other issues, which is not really part of the construction management curriculum, historically or traditionally. It may be part of the safety curriculum, I'm not sure, but I think those are some areas where you actually need to explore and expand a particular job and the skill set that might be in it. Patrick, as you work in the airports, are you seeing new types of positions that may be created as a result of the impact of the COVID virus?
Oh, certainly. I think that we have to, the way I see it in some of the new hires that we have brought on board, and what I've been looking at is folks being professionally nimble, as I like to call it. The ability for you to be able to look at a program and a project holistically, apply all of your skills and to a project and be ready to be able to, again, pivot into a new area, even if that area is not your expertise. And that has to be something that comes across from a confidence standpoint. While you may have graduated with an architecture degree, you thought your career was going to take you into a design path. When an incident like this hits, you have to be able to adapt to an environment where you're doing something different, where you're being asked to do more estimating, where you may be being asked to do, again, some scheduling. You may be asked to do some risk management. So these are skill sets that you should make sure you have a appetite for and be able to get into it, because it means your survival in this industry. I think also some of the things we have to look closely at is the academics. How do we start to structure our programs to adapt to this new environment? What's interesting is that you see what's happened over the last 10 years, and it's unprecedented. You've seen Sandy, you've seen 9/11, you've seen a huge resiliency in climate change, and all these things are impactful to the entire construction industry. Yet our academic environment hasn't adapted to those areas. I do think that folks need to start looking at maybe taking disaster recovery coursework incorporating that into a program, looking at taking real resiliency type of classes and incorporating that into a construction management program. Also looking at supply chain management and incorporating that into an overall program. And lastly, I would say construction logistics. There is an opportunity here with the COVID-19 for us to build at a scale that we haven't built in some time. The streets are empty. The infrastructure is very available. And DOT and a number of other major infrastructure projects that are going on now, you can look outside and see folks out there working, and you're no longer being hugely congested. So this creates an opportunity for construction logistics for folks that would normally take months to say put a roadway in. It's taking now a couple of weeks because of the volume on the streets. This sort of affects the bottom lines of projects in terms of cost. So how do we pivot and take advantage of the opportunity and really march forward with construction logistics in an environment where we have a significant reduction in traffic? Is something students and professionals need to recognize that they need to be able to do.
Yeah, so Fran, I think you have some questions about education, but it's a challenge for the academic institutions to change as well.
It is, thank you. And on that point, I think, especially the last years, we've seen an extraordinary investment in technology and in projects, in the way that many of these alternative delivery contracting methods have been pushed forward, and even the application of lean and agile. So on that point, Lou, I'm going to shoot this over to you. What type of education and training do you see as being the new imperative? And I think, again, you provide a great perspective coming at it also from the labor and the union side, which has historically had a very structured path to craftsmanship. Would love to hear your take on what you think that looks like going forward.
Lou, can you unmute? Unmute. Can we get Lou to unmute? Thank you.
On the project management side, the construction industry has always been challenged in recruiting people, whether you be architects, engineers, or just someone who doesn't have that technical background to come into the construction industry. In my career, when you look at the top 10 careers that students choose, construction is usually ranked on the bottom. That's what caused in the last couple of years this market where if you really had a really good background, you could really command your price, especially in the pre-construction, the estimating, project management. So I wonder if by what we're going through, we almost end up with an aging out process where many of the senior people say, you know what, I don't have the technical skills, because I think someone said it, flexibility is a key word. You have to know how to do everything and do it well. You have to know how to estimate a job. You have to know all the issues that Ralph was bringing about your supply chain. You're going to have to understand in a more comprehensive fashion the issue of risk. You know, typically we seem to be in an industry where risk is always pushed downward. And I think it's one of the reasons that design build, I say respectfully to my public sector partners, you haven't seen it really take off, because everybody says, well, that's really great. We're going to cooperate earlier, resolve all the problems, and then you get the contract. And the contract says the contractor is responsible for everything. So you say, you know what, I think I'll pass on that design build opportunity. You just look at the Tappan Zee Bridge as an example. Maybe they had 3 bidders, maybe. So I think from an individual perspective, if you're young, you try to get as much experience as you can in as many of the disciplines as you can to show that you can be adaptable. And I include in that design experience, insurance experience, legal experience, because all of those elements are going to come into play. But I really think we also have to have a fundamental re-examination of responsibility and some really reasonable rules and regulations. Otherwise, it's going to become another obstacle to recruiting people. I'll finish my remarks by giving you an example. because safety is going to be a key position to be recruited for. If we keep moving in a regulatory process where a site safety manager can be held personally responsible for anything that happens on the site, guess what? And it's happening right now. No one is applying for those jobs because the personal risk is too high. So I think we have to have a fundamental reassessment of what we need to do, what skill sets people need to have, and where responsibility lies. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be a large challenge to recruit new people into our industry.
Lou, it sounds like we may only have lawyers that are going to apply to these type of highly regulated roles.
Well, if you'll notice, recently, many of the CEOs of the larger companies have legal training by background.
Yes,
and
that's
they
true.
learn about the construction industry. I'm not saying I suggest.
Yeah, no, but it's an important perspective. And Ralph, you mentioned, we often forget that the understanding of the insurance process, the policies, the exclusions play a big role. Ralph, let me ask you this. So we've got sort of this tacit knowledge base that you build through experience and through craft and through working. And then there's this explicit knowledge base that you develop through schooling, through your certificates. Right now, looking at the polls, most of our attendees actually are employed. There's a smaller percentage that have been furloughed. You don't have all the time in the world. Many of these people are working maybe more than they did before. What small explicit things could they do to improve and develop on this education? Is it either going deeper on an existing expertise or perhaps going across, such as most of us have suggested on this conversation?
Well, I think your ability to embrace technology will be key. So I think now more than ever, the collaboration gene is what we're looking for in individuals, and that people that are going to embrace new ideas and new ways of doing things. So specifically, look, we can all observe the social distancing and wear masks and figure out how to build a job in the environment that we're in. I'm looking for people that can actually disrupt the way that we've done things historically. I'm looking for people that can engineer the risk of social distancing out of a way to put a building together, or the way to design a particular building. I'm looking for people that are going to embrace modular construction. I'm looking for people that are going to embrace cross-laminated timber, where we can manufacture components in a controlled environment. We're not so dependent upon jamming people into transit cars. The quality improves, the safety improves, but it's a step change from the way that our market has typically operated. So we're looking for people that are going to challenge the way that we've done things historically, or we're going to just keep our fingers crossed that a vaccine comes, and a vaccine comes quickly. Right.
Ralph, thank you. That's an excellent insight. Renee?
Actually, let me ask Marcelo. Marcelo, do you have a thought before we move to the next topic, which is related to how do we create a model for experience? But on the education, do you see some type of, similar to what Ralph has talked about, a sort of new professional, a disruptor, a creative thinker?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, our industry has been notorious for being slow to adopt new technology. And, over the last 10 years or so, that's clearly, changing for the better. Finally, things like BIM and data analytics and AR and VR and drone and a host of other things are really, making, sticking and sort of growing in their use. So I think, I would encourage, and it's not necessarily, asking folks to become experts at any or all of that, but certainly be aware of how to leverage that technology on the job site. That's as important as actually knowing the specific skills, is really how to leverage that. And that adds value to an organization. So that's what I would add.
I think there's a great deal of responsibility that you as leaders in your organizations have. How do you create the kinds of work experiences for young people, or even middle-level people who are, mid-level people are more difficult because they're in a position, they're used to that position, but you're looking to grow, and it's part of the university's mission to do that as well. What do you see a plan or a model and I haven't asked this to anybody yet, so I'm not sure if anybody wants to answer it. How do you create this experiential job career process for your entry employees before they get to you, or even before they get to you while they're at the university, where they may be looking at collaborative experiences or internships? What should the industry be doing? Actually, I'm going to throw this to you, Lou, because you're most familiar with the union environment and apprenticeship training, and beyond anything, our workforce is well trained in the union environment. But what do we do about young people entering an industry who historically in a buyer's market were they looked at a job, if they got the job, they got their highest salary, but now have to look at becoming more of a generalist and more experienced. How do you create that platform for them within the corporations? What would you say to your members in terms of taking on new employees?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult for our members because they don't have a lot of money to invest in that training opportunity. I think, as Ralph just said, you're looking for a different kind of person coming directly out of college that maybe a person that maybe has some experience is maybe looking to make a career change. I think if we're really talking about the kind of fundamental changes that we're going to have to do what we did with the unions and construction skills. We're going to have to get into the high schools. We've often tried as contractors to start exposing kids at younger ages as to what the skill sets are that are going to be required, the excitement about working on the project management side, but we've never really gotten off the ground. And so as a result of that, it's been left to each individual company. And each individual company has worked with various higher education programs, construction management programs, and really been responsible for addressing these issues completely on their own. I think the economics of scale is going to make that very, very difficult, at least in the first couple of years. And we've got to take a look at how do we focus in on people that maybe want a career change now? What are the skill sets? But if we're really going to look at the long term, we've got to get into the high schools at a minimum and start talking about what an exciting career opportunity this is.
Ralph, if you're looking at a new entry into Lend-Lease, what's in store for them? Do you review putting them in a number of different experiences? This has been part of the MBA programs that a lot of the top 5 accounting firms and consulting firms have used, where they've actually taken an employee and taken them through a variety of different experiences. Is that something a company like Lend-Lease and even Denise, AECOM, can do? I mean, this is a tight time. You're under a lot of pressure, but you're also building the next generation of employees. Is that something Lend-Lease would look at?
Yeah, so we have a grad program where we take interns every year. This year we didn't, only because it was very difficult to indoctrinate somebody in our ways of doing things remotely. And I'm disappointed about that because, we find that we get to kind of test drive some people very early and figure out if they like us and we like them. But we have a grad program where we'll run our new hires through. We typically hire 50 grads every year, a lot from Columbia, a lot from Manhattan College, a lot from Cooper Union. And we try to expose them on a rotational basis through all the things that they're going to encounter and to see the things that they might gravitate to. So we'll start them in the field and they will learn the fundamentals about safety, how to keep their self-site. They'll learn about code. They'll learn about what the various trades do. And who does what, and then we'll bring them in and they will do a project management stint, they will do a cost planning stint, estimating, they'll spend some time in safety, and then kind of on nights and weekends, we indoctrinate them into our legal process, our marketing process, our business development process. They really get an exposure to all the things that you need to do or know how to do if you're going to run the company someday.
Yeah, I hope you reinstate that virtual program shortly.
I hope so also.
To get those interns. Denise, do you have similar systems at AECOM?
We do. So at AECOM, we have a DPM program where we bring many graduates in, and many of them coming from Columbia University to work on the various aspects, mostly in project controls, though, in various market sectors, building and places, infrastructure, water. In addition, at my past job at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, they had a highly competitive, I guess it was called a trainee program, associate program for major capital programs, and in the engineering department where people rotated through the different businesses and learning a lot of, quality assurance, procurement, different elements of in design and construction. And I think those are unique programs. I'm glad, and I think they're unique, and I think it's really helpful for students to understand the different markets, the businesses, the procurement end of putting a project together in design and construction.
Yeah. Patrick, you're a bit newer to the JFK project, but do you see those kinds of experiences for internships or collaborative experiences being opened up there?
I was on mute. So yes, we do. I think that, again, the covert environment has made it difficult to incorporate interns into our environment. It's really important from an intern standpoint that they have the hands-on experience. So doing it from remotely really sort of takes away from the experience. But we do, we are open to bringing on interns. And there's a lot of business lines with the airport that has those opportunities. Obviously, the Carlisle Group, McKissick, and a number of different large and very successful organizations are involved in this project. So there's opportunities for internships because there are a number of different principal companies that really are contributing to this project. So I do think that, again, the covert situation has made it very difficult for interns to come on board, and hopefully, when this thing sort of dies down, we'll be taking a closer look at how we want to incorporate interns into our program.
Fran?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Well, all right, then this leads us to one of our last kind of conceptual discussions, which is the economics of the path. And I remember, I was very young, I don't remember, but in the 80s and 90s, you saw people coming out of school and grad school looking for the large multinationals, right? That was kind of what HBS grads and Kellogg grads and some of these folks were looking to get into. In the late 90s, 2000, .com, and then through the 2000s, investment banking, private equity, and then the last few years we saw technology in Silicon Valley and the startup world siphon out a lot of our greatest minds, some cynics and critics would say. So I've always been very passionate, as you said, about this industry. I think it is an extraordinarily important one. I think we underestimate its impact to the broader economy, its dependency into and with manufacturing and both low income and middle income and high income job creation. So for me, and I am a big proponent, I think everybody else on this call is as well, the economics of this career are still strong and extraordinary. And I'd love to get some feedback from our panelists into how they would view right now, thinking through these choices with hindsight, coming out of graduate school, coming out of undergraduate in engineering and architecture and construction management and finance. How would you design your next 5 or 10 years if what you wanted to do is be in construction as a construction manager, in project delivery, in project strategy, either private sector or public sector?
Who would like to be first? Denise would like to be first.
I just want to say, if you think about today, you think about Governor Cuomo, where he is today, he's with the president and he's there focusing on infrastructure projects. So I think all sectors have taken a hit, but I believe fully that infrastructure, and everyone knows, comes back. For every 13,000 jobs, every $1 million, this 13,000 jobs that it creates in work. So they understand that. So for the people out there who are in construction, I would just say, listen to the panel. There will be work. It just may be different. There may be more opportunities. We said in site safety, project controls. So to be, even if you're going out for the structural architect, stay with that. But what we're saying is look at other avenues also. Be more diverse, be adaptable, be flexible. I think the work will come, and it's going to be looking at, and I know New York City and the governor's office is looking at different lenses to see where the COVID virus has hit and looking at strategically what projects they're going to be putting forward. But there'll be the big projects. The JFK project will be out there. I know the Port Authority is moving forward with their projects. The commercial and residential projects will be a little behind. And it's going to take time for the recovery. But what I'm saying is the jobs will be there. It'll just take some time. And this is an opportunity for some people to really maybe hone in on some of the skills that they want to do that. And Columbia University is a great avenue to do that.
So the economics still make sense.
Yes,
and the
absolutely.
path is still relatively clear. And I do agree with Marcelo that the fundamental roles are not going to change, but as Ralph and Lou and Maggie and the rest have highlighted, there's going to be slight adjustments and tweaking. Maggie, would you like to give us a little bit of insight from where you sit, particularly the DDC and the mayor's office?
Sure. So I want to echo what Denise just said. And I also want to make a plug for this time, I believe, is a really opportune time for women to get into the industry. I think, you know, personally, as the mother of daughters, I think women, this is a great area for women, and women tend to be, to embrace change more easier because we tend to have to be flexible in terms of our career choices and our career paths. So I think this time is a great time for women to get into the technology of construction, as well as maybe the change in the environment of construction. So I'm optimistic, as I said before, and in terms of government sector jobs, the city is going to continue improving its infrastructure because we have no choice. So the jobs will be there. It may be, you know, temporarily we're closed, but the jobs will be there. I have great faith in that.
And I'm just going to give us a selfish plug here. Some of our largest growth in our admissions and student body have been from women, especially women coming from the technical fields of architecture and engineering, who have wanted to go through graduate studies to move into the field, to move into project management, to move into project delivery, and more into project leadership. So it's just been a wonderful thing to see, and Women's Builders Council has done just a phenomenal job in promoting and really connecting young professional women with senior executives.
Yeah,
Ralph?
Fran, one of our questions before you go to Ralph was, is there an opportunity for more women to move into leadership positions? And that's happening. And so look to Women Builders Council, I'm plugging them, because those women leaders are the next generation of leaders of the companies. I'm just informing you, Ralph, that is happening in Marcelo. So I'm just letting you know. look down, they're coming up. Sorry to interrupt, Fran. Go ahead. Ralph, did you want to say something about that?
No, I don't know if Fran had a question for me. You know, look, just the thing I would add, or my recommendation would be, don't be afraid of the field. I think that there are, you know, a lot of people that gravitate towards project management to sitting in an office. But I would say that exponentially, I think you learn a lot more in the field in a lot shorter duration. And I think that there's more opportunities in the field because a lot of people do gravitate to project management. So don't be afraid of it. And the last thing that I would say is try to get involved in as many associations as you possibly can. So I know Denise Berger from ACE Mentor. I know Marcelo Velez from ACE Mentor. I know Feniaski Peña-Mora from the National Academy of Construction. So, you know, a big part of, you know, you advancing your career, it's, you know, it's wonderful what you know, but it's also who you know. And to the extent that you can kind of grow your network and connect the dots and make connections on people that might turn you on to an opportunity that you never knew that you always wanted, I think that that's important. And I think there are we're blessed with ACE Mentor and ULI and a lot of industry events where you can really get to know people and grow your network and create some opportunities for you.
That's great. And I also want to highlight that we often forget that, you know, construction perhaps does not have the sexy image of startup, but it is still a highly paying industry. It pays well. There's clear paths to middle class and up from there. The data is out there. It shows what a wonderful way to develop your skills. And not only that, you're doing construction within sectors. You could be exposed to higher ed and institution and laboratories, or to luxury hotels, giving you an opportunity to go from delivery to owner and development. And like Ralph said, I think often people forget that the field is something that is not valuable, but is extraordinarily valuable. And it's times where you're looking at things to do and ways to improve that skill set. Getting into the field and understanding how it actually gets delivered becomes an extraordinary asset.
I would just add that, just to piggyback on what you and Ralph said, I think in a down market especially, I think is the most important thing is to look for the best experience and maybe forego the highest salaries or what you had thought would deliver the highest salaries, because ultimately the best experience will eventually translate into, real value, for you professionally. I personally started actually through government and at the SCA in its infancy, when there was essentially very little, when the organization was growing, and I had the opportunity to build among the biggest projects they did, which was a real launching pad to me, then to move on to other sort of more private sectors.
Let me comment. I think what Marcelo just mentioned is incredibly important for someone who's coming out of school. Assess your opportunities when you have them. Realize the time you're competing, but then get involved. Maybe it's not the perfect job, the one you've been looking for, but grab onto it, learn, expand your knowledge base, and you'll find you'll become extremely marketable. Because moving from one company where they've seen your growth is very different than coming just out of school. So I think what Marcelo is saying is very, very critical. I'm not saying sell your soul, but I just think that given where we are right now, opportunities could be somewhat limited. Make sure that you find something that you're passionate about and grab hold of the opportunity and grow.
And I think what we've seen this afternoon is a whole new look at what the construction industry is from different perspectives. It's not just a singular job, it's more than that. And I think to Ralph's point about creating disruptive innovators, how do you do that? And how can the universities be challenged to do that as well in terms of the way they roll out their curriculums? I think it's a time for everyone to look at as to how we can change. I want to thank all the panelists for participating today. We had a lot of interest in this program, and we will be distributing that short briefing paper to all of the registered attendees following that. Fran, any last comments?
No, thank you very much, and we appreciate participating both as observers and our panelists. And again, we really encourage you to reach out to us. We want to hear your story, and we want to incorporate those experiences and your thoughts into our report. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you all. We'll conclude the meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.